Hey guys! So when we left Mary, the robin had flown into the secret garden, and when she asked Ben Witherstaff, the gardener, about it, he kind of gets all uncomfortable and walks away. So we've got mystery number 1. We are about to encounter mystery number 2. We'll probably take a few days to read this chapter, but this chapter is called A Cry in the Corridor. And a corridor is like a long hallway. Such a dun-dun-dun name for a chapter. At first, each day which passed by for Mary Lennox was exactly like the others. Every morning she awoke in her tapestried room and found Martha kneeling upon the hearth building her fire. Every morning she ate her breakfast in the nursery, which had nothing amusing in it, and after each breakfast she gazed out of the window across to the huge moor, which seemed to spread out on all sides and climb up to the sky. And after she had stared for a while, she realized that if she did not go out, she would have to stay in and do nothing. And so she went out. She did not know that this was the best thing she could have done. And she did not know that when she began to walk quickly or even run along the paths and down the avenue, she was stirring her slow blood and making herself stronger by fighting the wind which swept down from the moor. She ran only to make herself warm, and she hated the wind, which rushed at her face and roared and held her back as if it were some giant she could not see. It's a great description. But the big breaths of rough, fresh air blown over the heather filled her lungs with something which was good for her whole thin body, and whipped some red color into her cheeks and brightened her dull eyes when she did not know anything about it. But after a few days spent almost entirely out of doors, she wakened one morning knowing what it was to be hungry. And when she sat down to her breakfast, she did not glance disdainfully at her porridge and push it away, but took up her spoon and began to eat it, and went on eating until her bowl was empty. "Huh! Thou got on well enough with that this morning, didn't thou?" said Martha. "It tastes nice today," said Mary, feeling a little surprised at herself. "It's the air of the moor that's given thee stomach for thy victuals," which is like a really old-fashioned word for food, answered Martha. "It's lucky for thee that thou's got victuals as well as appetite. There's been 12 in our cottage as has the stomach and nothing to put in it. You go on playing you out of doors every day, and you'll get some flesh on your bones, and you won't be so yeller." "I don't play," said Mary. "I've got nothing to play with." "Nothing to play with?" exclaimed Martha. "Our children plays with sticks and stones. They just runs about and shouts and looks at things." Mary did not shout, but she did look at things. There was nothing else to do. She walked round and round the gardens and wandered about the paths in the park. Sometimes she looked for Ben Witherstaff, but though several times she saw him at work, he was too busy to look at her, or was too grumpy. Once, when she was walking toward him, he picked up his spade and turned away as if he did it on purpose. One place she went oftener than to any other. It was the long walk outside the gardens with the walls round them. There were bare flower beds on either side of it, and against the walls ivy grew thickly. There was one part of the wall where the creeping dark green leaves were more bushy than elsewhere. It seemed as if for a long time that part had been neglected. The rest of it had been clipped and made to look neat, but at this lower end of the walk it had not been trimmed at all. A few days after she had talked to Ben Witherstaff, Mary stopped to notice this and wondered why it was so. She had just paused and was looking up at a long spray of ivy swinging in the wind when she saw a gleam of scarlet and heard a brilliant chirp, and there, on the top of the wall, perched Ben Witherstaff's Robin Redbreast, tilting forward to look at her with his small head on one side. "Oh!" she cried out. "Oh, it's you! Is it you?" And it did not seem at all strange to her that she spoke to him as if she was sure he would understand and answer her. He did answer. He twittered and chirped and hopped along the wall as if he were telling her all sorts of things. It seemed to Mistress Mary as if she understood him too, though he was not speaking in words. It was as if he said, "Good morning! Isn't the wind nice? Isn't the sun nice? Isn't everything nice? Let us both chirp and hop and twitter. Come on, come on!" Mary began to laugh, and as he hopped and took little flights along the wall, she ran after him. Poor little thin, sallow, ugly Mary. She actually almost looked pretty for a moment. "I like you! I like you!" she cried out, pattering down the walk, and she chirped and tried to whistle, which last she did not know how to do in the least. But when the robin seemed to be quite satisfied and chirped and whistled back at her, at last he spread his wings and made a darting flight to the top of a tree where he perched and sang loudly. That reminded Mary of the first time she had seen him. He had been swinging on a treetop then, and she had been standing in the orchard. Now she was on the other side of the orchard and standing in the path outside a wall, much lower down, and there was the same tree inside. "It's in the garden no one can get into," she said to herself. "It's the garden without a door. He lives in there. How I wish I could see what it was like." I wish too. I hope she finds out how to get in.